So if you're out there building AI products, listen up. There's a new skill that's going from a nice-to-have to an absolutely must-have, like overnight. It's called AI Evals. Today, we're going to break down exactly what that means, why it's so critical, and how you can actually use it to make your products so much better. Let's dive in.
And look, this isn't just some niche idea floating around. The chief product officers at both Anthropic and OpenAI, yeah, those two, have basically said that evals are becoming the single most important new skill for anyone building in this space. When you hear that from the leaders of the top AI labs, you know it's time to pay attention.
All right, so here's the game plan. First, we're going to talk about why evals are suddenly this huge deal. Then we'll look at the old way of doing things, the so-called vibe checks, and why that's just not cutting it anymore. We'll spend most of our time on a super practical 4-step process you can actually use. We'll touch on some of the drama and debates happening, and then we'll wrap with why this is your new product superpower.
You know, it's wild to think that just a couple of years ago, if you said the word evals, most of us would have just stared blankly. Now, it's a constant topic of conversation for top AI builders. I mean, it is seriously one of the fastest skill shifts we've ever seen, going from some obscure corner of a research lab to a core part of building a product.
So what on earth are they? Well, simply put, an eval is just a systematic way to measure and improve your AI app. And really, don't let the jargon scare you. At its core, it's basically just data analytics for your AI product. It's a structured way to figure out what's actually working, and more importantly, what isn't. Okay, so to really get why evals are such a big deal, we have to talk about the problem they solve. Building with these big language models, man, it can feel like total chaos, right? These systems are what's called stochastic, which is just a fancy word for unpredictable. So how do you get better at something you can't even reliably measure? For a while now, the go-to method has been what people call vibe checks. You know the drill. You use the product, you get a feel for it, you tweak a prompt here and there, and you just cross your fingers and hope you didn't just break 10 other things in the process. And hey, vibe checks are fine when you're just starting. But as your product gets more complex, that's when flying blind starts to get not just unmanageable, but flat out dangerous. All right, so this is the part where we bring order to the chaos. There is a repeatable 4-step process that can take you from just guessing and hoping to knowing exactly what needs to be fixed. Let's walk through it with a real example. It breaks down into 4 key stages. We start with manual error analysis, which flows into something called open coding. Then we clean that up with axial coding, and finally, we build an automated evaluator. Now, I know these names sound a little academic, but trust me, the logic behind them is super simple.
So let's make this real. Picture an AI assistant for a big apartment complex. A potential renter asks for a 1-bedroom with a study. The AI looks at its data, sees none, and just says, "Sorry, we don't have that," and boom, ends the conversation. Now, if you're just doing a vibe check, you might go, okay, the AI was technically correct. But as a product person, oh, that's a huge failure. That's a lead you just lost.
This is where we hit steps 1 and 2, manual analysis and open coding. And they kind of happen at the same time. You, as the product expert, just look at that chat log and scribble down your first gut reaction. No complex system, no fancy labels. You just see the problem and write, should have handed off to a human. Boom, that's it. That's your open code. Okay, but how do you keep this from turning into an endless debate by committee, right? We've all been there. Well, this is where the genius idea of the benevolent dictator comes in. You just appoint one person, usually the PM who knows the domain best, to make the calls quickly and move on. Remember, the goal here is speed and progress, not getting it perfect. So you do this for, say, 100 conversations, and what you'll have is this big, messy list of notes. The next step, axial coding. This is where the magic happens. You start clustering all those similar but messy notes into clean, countable categories. So didn't transfer call, abruptly ended, should have passed to agent. They all get bundled up into one simple category, human handoff issue. See how powerful that is? You're taking noise and turning it into a signal.
And bam, this is the payoff. This is the aha moment. Suddenly, you are in control. You're not drowning in random logs anymore. You can literally create a bar chart that screams, "Hey, these are our biggest problems." You've moved from total chaos to a crystal clear action plan.
Okay, awesome. You've identified your top 3 problems. You can go fix them, but how do you make sure they don't pop up again the next time you change the prompt? Well, that's the final step. Build an automated evaluator. For those tricky, subjective things like a good human handoff, you can use what's called an LLM as a judge. You're basically teaching another LLM to be an expert judge on just that one very specific problem. It becomes your tireless, automated reviewer.
Now, this brings up a really important point. For simple stuff, like checking if the output is valid JSON, a normal code-based test is perfect. But for those more nuanced, subjective problems, that LLM as a judge is way more powerful. But here's the golden rule for both, and this is non-negotiable. The output has to be a simple pass or fail, a clear yes or no. We're not doing any of those wishy-washy, rated on a scale of 1 to 5 things. That just adds noise back in.
All right, you've got the playbook now, so let's talk about the drama. Because, believe me, for a tool this useful, there are a ton of strong opinions and a lot of ways to mess it up. And the number one mistake people make, the biggest trap they fall into, is asking this very question. We're in the age of AI, right? So the first instinct is to try and automate that initial manual step of finding what's wrong.
And the answer is a hard no, at least not at the beginning. An LLM has zero business context. It doesn't know you don't have that virtual tour feature yet, so when the bot completely makes one up, the LLM will say, "Hey, that was a great, helpful response," when in reality it was a disaster. That first human-led step is all about encoding your team's unique point of view on what good actually means for your product. You can't outsource that. And this actually helps clear up a big debate you see online all the time, the whole vibes versus evals thing. But it's a false choice. Teams who say they just rely on vibes and using their own product, they're still doing evals. They're just doing the manual error analysis part. They're just different parts of the same process. It all falls under the big umbrella of systematically making your product better.
All right, let's bring it all home and talk about the real payoff here. Because this isn't just another task to add to your sprint. This is, and I'm not exaggerating, a product-building superpower.
I mean, the people who pioneered this whole process are on record saying this is the single highest ROI activity you can do, period. Why? Because every single minute you spend doing this is a straight line to making your product better for your users. It connects the work you do directly to the value they get. And maybe the best news of all, the most encouraging part of this whole thing is this. You don't need hundreds of these tests. You don't even need 20. Most of the best AI products out there have maybe 4 to 7 key automated evals that cover their biggest risks. That's it. It is a completely finite, totally achievable goal. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. What are the hidden problems, these silent failures, lurking in your product's logs right now? Because there's a really good chance that a single day, just one focused day of this kind of analysis is all it would take to uncover that.